All right, call to order. It's 1 o'clock. Any declaration of interest or any general nature of that type? None. Thank you. Chair's remarks. These remarks will be put over until the next meeting. They're not meant to be chair's remarks anyway, but yeah. All right, well, hang on for a minute. Art will be here. Hey, Art. We're at agenda item number 4, adoption of the agenda. Motion to adopt by Pierre, seconded by Wilhelmina. Discussion, any additions anyone would like to make? Changes? None. We could add, I guess we will add the issue of the street closure restriction to do with the Tipsy Goat. Do you want to add that, Pierre, or not? All right. How do we do that?
So we would have to make an amendment to the motion. So I have an additional resolution sheets.
That's okay.
So it would be.
And then we have a second motion, just to add that. Yes, Pierre? Okay, so first off, we have to vote on agenda being adopted as circulated.
Yes.
No further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Now we have to at the agenda. Okay, motion that the agenda be amended to include a discussion of street closure relating to the restoration work at the Tipsy Goat. Moved by Pierre, seconded by Mark. Discussion, yes, Marnie?
Yeah, thank you. If I could just ask that that be included on the agenda, maybe after we talk about, just because I'd like to include
Yep,
David in that, and he doesn't necessarily need to be here for some of the other items on the agenda.
right. Well, everything that we want to discuss with David, we'll do right away, I would assume. Yeah, it's okay. So further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. Motion is carried. All right, moving on. Delegation, adoption of the minutes. This is item number 5, confirmation of the minutes of the Municipal Heritage Committee meeting of April 8th, 2022. I assume everyone has read these. Motion to adopt. Wilhelmina, seconded. Arthur. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. None. Okay, 6. David Holiday. I think everyone knows David Holiday here. So Dave, you're going to talk first about Springfield House. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll talk about the Springfield House and Ascot combined. So as everybody knows, we've successfully relocated the archives working group into the portable trailer. And the storage currently, what is not housed in the trailer is housed in the garage. We do have some issues with humidity in that facility, so we're looking to move the collection back into Springfield House. as a result of our structural review that has been completed. So we had engaged Tacoma Engineering and their review of both Escott and the Springfield House found that while Escott requires a great deal of work, including structural support for the second floor and first floor and some foundational work, Springfield House is in good shape. Other than the third floor, they have concerns with the third floor of Springfield House being open to the public. So that would become a private only floor for the group and not for the public to attend. Other than that, we're able to meet our occupational capacity for the facility. And we're hoping, given that to be able to move that material, the collection back into the main level of Springfield House where it's air conditioned and humidity controlled. So I've been speaking with Dana about this, with the library, and she's had some troubles securing a moving company for this. So we need to explore alternative moving companies to see if we can engage somebody to move that collection, because it is fairly heavy. In addition to that, we're in the process of applying for the Ontario Trillium Fund, which is due in 3 weeks, and also the Canada Cultural Spaces Fund, which it doesn't have a deadline, it's an annual fund. So we want to try to catch it in 2022 and again in 2023. For the Canada Cultural Fund, we're breaking the project into phases. There are some additional investigations required, including energy audits and mechanical reviews and all those types of things, where we can apply by applying in phases, though all of these studies that are required can be done as phase one, and the fund will cover 50% of the costs rather than the township having to incur all of the cost. So that's the approach we've decided to take. I have a meeting with the consultant that is preparing the application on Monday, again, just to touch base and talk about the next steps in gathering information, and then we will proceed forward from there.
Questions? Arthur?
The Tacoma report that was circulated on the two buildings, I noticed that there's no analysis of the first floor Springfield House, that there's no comment at all. I'm wondering, are we relying on a previous report about what the ground floor needed, or if it needs nothing? On the contents of the Tacoma report, Springfield House lists the attic floor framing and the second floor framing, but there's nothing said about the first floor, which has been a big question in everybody's mind. So I wondered whose recommendations we're following there.
In speaking with the engineer for Tacoma, they took the occupancy of the building, and I think there is some information in the report regarding that, and divided it amongst the two floors, first and second floor. So it was a 60-person capacity limit for the entire building. So they took 29 or 30 people per floor, and they feel that the two floors have sufficient capacity to accommodate 30 people per floor. And I believe it was in the report, but I'll confirm that with them. I know that I've had a discussion with them, and they said that there is adequate stability for 60 occupancy for two levels.
Read their assessments of the various floors in both buildings. I was just curious why the first floor at Springfield House wasn't mentioned.
How will that impact moving the material from the garage into that one room in Springfield House? I mean, if it all goes into the room that's in the northeast corner of Springfield House, that's, I mean, it's a significant amount of weight. However, it's distributed in that room. I don't know that it would represent 30 people or not, but still.
Thank you. So the The 30 people per floor, when they did the review, is based on, as the building is used as a museum, the occupancy requirements for the loading with it being museum are much higher. The limits that we have to adhere to are much higher because it's open to the public and it's being used for that purpose. With it being closed to the public and only being used for storage, we don't have to adhere to those same levels of capacity that we do when we do
Yeah.
open it up. So we're safely able to store that material in there
Mhm.
while we're working on the Escott facility, and then ultimately the Escott, the old town hall will be constructed so that it will accommodate not only the public going in there, but also that dead load.
Pierre?
I just wanted to remind people that when the library was there, that was the site of the adult collection. And there were bookshelves around the perimeter and 2 sets of bookshelves in the middle of the floor as well. So that would be a considerably heavier weight than what we're foreseeing with the
Mhm. Okay,
storage.
well, that's fine.
entries.
I mean, everything that happened in the past doesn't matter. It's what we're looking at in going forward. So if, whatever weight we're putting in there, you just have to be certain that it conforms to what has been established as the limit.
Yes,
understanding
and the engineers
correctly
do feel that we have sufficient capacity for that purpose.
If I can just add one more thing.
Yes.
That you might not be aware of, because it just occurred yesterday, but all of the surplus library equipment that was stored in a smaller room has been moved into the garage now
Oh,
successfully.
perfect.
And some other material as well. And the large microfilm reader will be moved in there, as well as the cabinet that
Oh,
it sits
oh,
on.
Perfect.
So things are falling into place quite nicely.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Further questions for David regarding the Springfield House complex from anyone? I suggest then that we should move on to discuss the other items of business, those that are particularly relevant or would have questions that we would wish David to answer or discuss with us. So Lansdowne Railway sign, Wilhelmina, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, it's.
Put your mic on, please.
It's a 3-foot by 4-foot outdoor sign. I have it at my residence. I've checked it over. Brian Phillips has checked it over. We're very pleased with it. Now we're just working out when we want to unveil it. It is to be a public event. We will probably close Grand Trunk Avenue for the occasion. Because there will be several people who have been involved in it and other people that just want to come. So it's the when, and David just told me that the township will take care of the installation. And so we'll have a site visit as to where it will be placed. So if you have any questions, I might be able to answer them, or David.
All right, questions regarding the Lansdowne Railway sign? Comments?
It's on township property on Grand Trunk Avenue. If you want an address, it's opposite 10, pretty well opposite 10 Grand Trunk Avenue. It's the name of the historic house that was moved.
The Darling
Thank you.
Residence,
The
yeah.
Darling Residence.
was a store as well, yeah.
Yes, so it's underneath, I believe it's a soft maple. So there'll be shade.
Mhm.
And township might have other plans other than the sign there, but. Forward to it.
Great, thank you.
Further questions? All right, shall we talk the Prince Street wall? We'll just talk about this. I don't know that this really concerns us, the township, directly. This was did you want to give us a brief discussion of this, and we'll see what David has to say?
Yeah, the folks from the Tipsy Goat were inquiring about this originally. And I don't know if they were thinking of the heritage grants or not. Who owns the wall, the actual wall itself?
The county owns the wall.
The county owns the wall.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, while we're speaking about the wall, I had a meeting with the county last week,
Mhm.
and we're discussing the intersection at King and Prince. And the wall was one of the topics of discussion because there are concerns not only with the condition of the wall currently, but also with the turning movements coming off of Prince or off of King, sorry, onto Prince. Buses and larger vehicles have to merge into oncoming traffic in order to make the corner. So they're looking longer term at acquiring land from the property on the corner to create the space required for proper turning movements. And the wall would be relocated further back away from the current, where it is currently off the road.
Is King Street a county road as well, or is it township?
Yes, both
county.
King and Prince are county roads.
Mhm.
Oh, really? Okay, all right.
Okay, I think originally there might have been a thought that it was privately owned and that we might have
Well,
a role to play in terms of funding, helping to fund the repair and that sort of thing.
well, but the county has eminent domain to be able to take whatever they need for road work, right?
Correct.
So if they have to take the wall, we'll have to take the wall, and it's up to them whether they want to restore it.
That's right.
And any timeline for that?
Actually, I was just communicating again with the county today. They're going to be working with us. Our intent is to put out a request for proposal for looking at the entire village for drainage and sidewalks and rebuilding of the roads and everything. So as part of this, we have to engage an engineer who will come out and do the surveying and the design. And both groups felt that it made sense to make this one big project that tied in together rather than the county doing their design and us doing our design and it not jiving at the end of the day. So we're taking the lead on this, and my hope is to have it out in the next month or so
Mhm.
with the design completed sometime next year.
Mhm. Great. And I guess there'll be ample opportunity for community input and all that sort of thing.
Yes, with any reconfiguration of the roads, we will hold a public information center, and the public will be able to come in and have an opportunity to see what we're proposing and provide any feedback.
So David, as a member of the Lansdowne Association for Revitalization, you probably have noticed that there's a planter box right there. And so that I'll report back to LAP, our association, but of course it would have to be moved as well.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe not have a planter box there. I don't know. We'll see.
Or incorporated in somehow. There's been requests as well for a bench at that location, and I believe a waste facility.
Oh,
So it might be an opportunity to tie it all in together, make it something nice. It will certainly be considered during design.
Further comments or questions relating to the Prince Street wall? Right, St. John's Church, we can speak about that later. Private lanes, Art, yes?
I don't know if I should have had this added to the agenda or not. I just wanted to ask David, in their discussions with the county, has there been discussions about Linders Bridge and what's going to happen? Is there a pointing project scheduled?
I have had this discussion with the county. They actually approached me. They require some drainage, and we have that property on the north-hand side that leads down to the river. So there's some discussions about a potential outlet through that property. They have engaged an engineer who is doing a design. They've had some issues, I guess, with the parging that was used on the facade, which is the old stone work and some of the concrete work underneath it. So there is a project plan for that bridge to be rebuilt. And my discussion with them was about incorporating a pedestrian facility on that bridge as well, rather than constructing another one. And they think that there's an opportunity, there's enough width on the surface of the bridge to accommodate vehicular traffic as well as pedestrian traffic. And something that would be, in place for the summer, but then removed in the winter, so it doesn't impact their winter operations. So it's on the books for them for sure. In terms of timeline for construction, I'm unaware of that at this time, but can certainly find out.
I presume the planning is in conjunction with, consultation with the Ontario Heritage Foundation, who have an easement on the bridge.
I will ask that question as well.
Okay, shall we move on?
Thank you.
Private, yes, Art, do you have a further question?
No,
Naming of private lanes is really doesn't impact, and Dave does, do you have, no, all right, so,
I'm happy to stay here for the whole meeting if you guys just want to go through it, so you're not all over the place. I'm okay with that.
all right,
So I was just thinking Dave might have something to say about the item with respect to the road closure request
Right.
for
Right.
the Tipsy Goat.
well, let's talk about that. Tipsy Goat, if they are going to go ahead with their restoration work, I assume, at some point over the summer,
I haven't been in communication with them
Right.
recently.
but
Looks like it though.
they've been approved for the grant, so I assume that they will use it.
Mhm.
The point is, or the issue here was, if they did, they had spoken to you, is that right, about road closure, or did you have a discussion with them?
I think it was a series of emails you were part of, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I was involved. They
what-
would need permission from the county to locate.
It's a county
the-
road, right?
It's
Yeah.
county road on either side, so they would need permission from the county to put their lift in the road, similar to what they did last year when she was painting.
Right,
Mhm.
So that wouldn't be any local approval date.
yeah, so that's not an issue for us to deal with.
Huh.
All right, shall we then talk about cemeteries? I think did everyone get this little piece that I wrote yesterday in a hurry? You don't have it, Dave? So if everyone has read this anyway, I will just go over it briefly. I think it's all fairly straightforward. And this came out of to a bit out of me attending the Ontario Heritage Conference in a particular session about cemeteries, which it was the issue is certainly is not restricted to our area. Small cemeteries everywhere are having difficulties. And as I've explained in my document here, one of the things that they have to deal with is the cost of maintenance, particularly since their revenue stream is diminishing. And because most of these cemeteries are old, over 100 years old, and really do represent a kind of a historic and cultural site within the township, that if the cemeteries are in need of financial assistance toward their maintenance, that the township should be prepared to provide that. And I think also the township in the long term should develop some sort of policy regarding cemeteries, since aside from the cemeteries which are still operating and being managed by volunteer boards, the township already owns 10 or 12, or has listed, the township has listed on its license 10 or 12 cemeteries, some of which are not being used, most of which are not being used, I should say, and some of which are being maintained and some of which are not being maintained. So the motion, which I proposed in the document and is we have prepared here, is, I will read it out, that the Municipal Heritage Committee recommend that council acknowledge the cultural and historic significance of the cemeteries within the township of Leeds and Lansdowne, and that council directs staff to draft a cemeteries policy that includes a budget line for cemetery maintenance. Because currently, I don't believe there is a budget line for that. Is there? Dave? No, I mean, you just do it as part of park maintenance, right?
Yes, currently, we're just picking up the maintenance of the cemeteries that we are providing maintenance to, just with our general maintenance.
Right. So that involves weed eating in most of the cemeteries 2 or 3 times during the summer and mowing and 2 cemeteries, I think. Is that correct?
Some of the cemeteries, like the Lansdowne one that we have been mowing for the last year, we've been mowing once every 2 weeks to once a month, depending on the conditions. And we do have some other ones where it's once a month to once every month and a half, depending on the conditions. So it all depends on what the conditions of the cemetery are at the time. If it's dry, we don't have to mow it quite as often, and if it's wet, then we have to mow it more frequently.
And I mean, and then there are some cemeteries that don't get anything.
That is correct. Yeah.
And some only get weed eating, I think. Is that correct? I mean,
No, I think we weed whack and mow at all the ones that we provide maintenance to. But I could be mistaken.
no, I mean, yes, Marnie.
Thanks. Just looking at the different lists, because we've got a couple of different things floating around. We've got the Heritage Register, and we have the Master Cemeteries list, and some of them are owned, some of them are maintained. So just based on the information I've been able to find, there's 15 cemeteries that are on the township license number. There's 7 cemeteries that are on the Township Heritage Register, and there's 9 cemeteries that are maintained by the township based on the Master Cemeteries list that we have. One of the things, just based on the information you provided, I was wondering about, just to throw out there as well. Currently, when you look at the Heritage Celebration Grant, that money is directed to listed and designated properties on the register, but it wouldn't include cemeteries. So currently there's 7 on the register that could potentially apply for a Heritage Celebration Grant if that policy was amended to include cemeteries or other properties, which would allow for a grant of up to $2,500. The other thing that does exist is the community grants, which we have had the Lansdowne Cemetery previously apply for and be approved for a community grant. So that is, the community grants are an existing grant opportunity that does exist, that cemeteries could potentially apply for to assist with maintenance. But the Heritage Celebration Grant is another opportunity where if we were looking to potentially update that policy framework in terms of eligibility, that would present an opportunity for properties that are included on the Heritage Register to apply for some grant funding. Just a thought to put out there for committee consideration.
I guess I just wonder whether it's appropriate for those grants to be used for maintenance.
It could go towards headstone restoration or something along those
Well,
lines,
Lily
but-
Cemetery did apply for the Heritage Celebration Grant to do headstone repair. And that's one of the things that I don't think the township has any plan for now in the few cemeteries that it looks after. That, you know, nobody is going around and looking at them and saying, oh, well, these headstones are unstable and something needs to be done to
Yeah.
make them safe. And in that instance, I would say the celebration grant is appropriate, but I think that in the longer term, the township does need to have a policy regarding cemeteries, both the cemeteries that they carry on their license and other cemeteries in the township that potentially will need financial assistance to cover their maintenance costs. Pierre?
Just for the sake of having appropriate background information. I'm not up on the Cemeteries Act, but doesn't it have language in it that says that the municipalities are responsible for the cemeteries in their jurisdiction?
It's not that straightforward. It's a very complicated process that they have to go through involving the court in order for a cemetery that is, doesn't have good management board or whatever, in order for the township to take over that cemetery. I think the township probably can short circuit that by just agreeing to take it over. But in a normal situation where there's an abandoned cemetery and the township doesn't really want to be responsible for it, then it requires court action. Mark, you had a question?
So I've been trying to look into this too, based on conversations we've had and with others. And I guess, you know, some people, some of the cemeteries that people pay a lot of attention to down here in the south seem to be getting maintenance, seem to be, and they're also active in terms of internments and everything else. Whereas there's the inconsistency across the township where others are on their own. So we're not just talking about a policy here to put a budget line in for maintenance. We need an overarching policy about how everybody should be treated. And right now it's not consistent. It may be driven by certain statutes or certain existing practices, but it isn't fair and it isn't consistent.
Well, I agree, but I mean, it's all a hangover from before amalgamation.
Well, maybe, but we're beyond that now.
I
And
know,
it's
I know.
very irritating for me as a counselor to get it in the neck from one crowd and see people complaining on Facebook that the cemetery down here isn't being well attended by the township. And so I look at it and say, well, this isn't working for anybody.
Yeah.
So we are not looking at a budget line. We're looking at an actual proper policy about cemeteries. And while we're at it, because of the heritage nature and value of cemeteries to our understanding of our own history, that it should be part of an overall strategy around what involves trails, what involves tourism, what involves heritage generally, so that we're not doing a piecemeal approach to everything, which we tend to do, which brings me to, 3 years of frustration.
No,
on a
no,
lot of
I
different
agree
things.
totally. I mean, if there was a policy, then, I mean, over a period of time, the township could sort of regularize everything so that all the cemeteries, many of the cemeteries which are on the township license are on private property. In my mind, that creates a problem vis-a-vis access and responsibility in terms and liability for those cemeteries. And I agree that in the former Front and in Escott, they dealt more expeditiously and completely with this matter than was done in the Rear Township. But the point is now is to get policy in place and get, as I say, get everything regularized for the future moving ahead. So that's when I say cemeteries policy, it's pretty vague, but I think that's really what it's got to be. And it's, somebody's got to, people both from staff and from interested groups, whether it's cemetery boards or people from this committee or anyone else, have to sit down and discuss how that all should be done. Yes.
Just to the extent that a motion to go to council to get an overarching policy on every aspect of it. Because if we just simply say, okay, well, we're going to start having township just begin to pick up the maintenance and care of other cemeteries, and it goes on, that's a very expensive proposition for the township. And we will hear from people with a different point of view on that. And I'm saying that as somebody that, gets the, don't raise taxes. It doesn't matter. Just don't fix it. Just don't do anything about it. Just leave everything the way it is and don't raise our taxes. And that's what we deal with. And of course, it's not a sentiment that I share, because one reason we have had some of the problems that we have is because we haven't attended to making sure that we take care of everything from cemeteries to buildings and everything else. So at this stage, I would be recommending that the Heritage Committee simply say to council, you need to develop an all-encompassing cemeteries policy in the context of other policies that affect ways and means in this township. So that's my point of view.
Right. Does that mean we should change the wording in the,
It's just a budget line for cemetery maintenance is one thing,
right?
but it's the overarching total policy that we need so that everything is treated equally, of course, but also that we can take the time to study what the needs are, whether it's the private ones, the more public ones, or the ones that are church-based for now. And we know, because of the discussions that you and I have been involved in, that some of those church cemeteries are at some point may change, because not everybody has the succession principle. And that's the other thing that I know, the discussion about having a super kind of organization that would provide services to all the cemeteries is not a bad idea. We just haven't had an opportunity to thresh it out to the point where we can come to a conclusion. So I just don't want to focus on a maintenance line.
No,
I'd
all
like
right.
to see a full-blown policy to get us going in the right direction. That's all. Thanks.
No, well, and then are you suggesting a change in the wording of that motion, I guess is what I want to know.
If I could.
I
suggest-
think the historical significance that council, that it recognized, we should recommend that the council get to that, but also instruct staff to draft a cemeteries policy, period.
All right, stroke off the budget line maintenance.
And give them the running room to get it done.
If I could suggest, maybe we could add a series of bullets after your motion that list these different aspects that you want covered. So, we asked that the policy be comprehensive, that it include private and township maintained cemeteries, that it recognize cultural heritage aspects and tourism potential, and that it addresses budgetary considerations as well. And anything else that somebody can think of.
I'm making bullet points here now.
So am I.
Okay, well, let's have them.
Okay, so private and township-owned cemeteries include the cultural heritage aspects.
So wait a minute, are you changing the first paragraph of it?
I don't have it in front of me, but I
Yes, you
just,
do. Turn to the second page here, that piece, it's right there at the bottom of the page.
oh, recommends the council, okay. The cultural historic. Okay, and the other one was, there's no tourism in there. And the last one I had was budgetary consideration. I don't have the wording correct, but just try to,
Okay,
you know,
let's to
your
be clear
points
here,
are-
hang on just a moment, please. Let's be clear. We're talking about draft cemeteries policy, and that's where the bullet points are going to come in. What is included in the draft cemeteries policy, what we would like to see. So that's where we want the bullet points, the various items added here.
Yeah, so
So-
if we could move the cultural and historical significance to the bullet list, then it would still read, recommends to council to acknowledge the significance of the cemeteries within the,
Well, we want to leave that in the first part of it, and then the cemeteries policy includes,
exactly.
now I'm confused here. So,
I have it.
you have it?
I think I have it.
Okay.
So that the MHC recommends to council that it acknowledge the cultural and historic significance of the cemeteries within the township instead of municipality. And instruct staff to draft a cemeteries policy to include private and township-owned cemeteries, cultural heritage and tourism, and budgetary considerations.
I think you got it.
And
Thank
instead of
you, Lauren.
include, maybe that addresses, sorry, to draft a cemeteries policy that addresses or that includes private and township-owned cemeteries, cultural heritage and tourism, and budgetary considerations.
You're,
Mark,
sorry, I was going to call you your worship, but it's not your turn yet. I was going to say including but not limited to. Just because the staff gets into this, they're, of
Right.
course, they already know and they're going to find out that the list is longer and wider and deeper than we think or know.
That's a good point.
all right. Is that been changed from there? So, can we see it on there? Can I read it off or can someone read it off? Can you read it off?
Yeah, of course. So through you, Mr. Chair, the recommendation be resolved that the Municipal Heritage Committee recommends that council acknowledge the cultural and historic significance of the cemeteries within the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands, and that council directs staff to draft a cemeteries policy, including but not limited to private sale of cemeteries, budget deliberations, and I believe there's another point to that, but that is clear on my end.
Cultural and historic, what was it that you had that in yours?
Private and township-owned cemeteries, cultural heritage, tourism, and budgetary considerations.
All right. Would you like it read again, anyone? Can I have a move, someone to move this? Mark, moved by Mark, seconded by Art. And then now, discussion. Have we had the discussion already?
I guess we don't need to put in a recommendation for public consultation.
Well, I mean,
We take it that would be understood.
I
Not
think,
necessarily, it's an operation of policy. I think it would involve consultation with some cemetery boards.
right.
But it wouldn't necessarily, you open it up to public consultation. I think we need to look at best practice. I think that needs to be left to the staff. level.
All right.
Council,
All right.
because it's gonna snowball. as soon
Yeah.
as it starts.
I hear you.
Okay.
On
Then-
that, though, I was thinking that perhaps the Leeds and Thousand Islands Historical Society might be interested in being part of it.
Sure.
So would the way around your concern be something like consultation with appropriate stakeholders?
Mark,
If it's a policy, if staff, if council directs staff to develop a policy, so many of these other things are triggered. Public consultation and everything else because, and other groups and everything else will happen because that's the way it works. The other thing is that we're pretty much into the lame duck period. So that this is going to be a recommendation that this council will make to the incoming council, to the next council. And perhaps in the context of the existing strategic plan, it has a place as well. I mean, for me, it's just, I'd really like to see something that pulls it all together and actually gives us something we can work with.
and that also means because it's a lame duck council, it'll be incumbent on the Heritage Committee to follow up on this because it's one of those things that could get easily lost, I think. All right, further discussion. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now, we've done that. Remaining business, St. John's Church. Did everyone read the I think as part of the agenda, there was a little note in the agenda. Yes, no, was that? There was no note.
No, I don't.
What happened?
I don't remember it.
Oh, did I not send? All right. All right. Okay, I'm going to give you the rundown here. St. John's Church, it's a little church on the Sweets Corners Road near the golf course, just for reference for everyone who doesn't know that area well. Church was built in 1848. There's a cemetery that goes with it. Church has not been used for regular services for several years now. And the diocese generally is downsizing and reorganizing itself. The church will be deconsecrated this year. And the building will be turned, the ownership of the building, which now currently resides with the congregation, the body of the congregation. And the ownership will be turned over to the diocese, who owns the property where the cemetery is. The general feeling is that the diocese will not want to pay to insure or maintain the building, and that there's a good likelihood that the building will be demolished within the next few years. So the concern is that this building is not on the Heritage Register. Putting it on the Heritage Register might delay the demolition, can delay the demolition, and certainly would require the building department to notify the Heritage Committee when an application for demolition is received. So the motion in this case would be to recommend it to council that this church be placed on the Heritage Register. Yes, Marnie?
As per the updates to the Heritage Act, it can't be added to the Heritage Register without a full assessment being done in accordance with the Bill 108. So that would need to be completed to support a recommendation to council. So if that's the road that you do want to go down, you could complete the assessment form. As members of the committee, we could look at it in our September meeting.
But that would be us completing the assessment form, the Heritage Committee,
Yes,
not a third party.
no, and you've done that on other properties that have
Yes,
been
yes.
added to the Heritage Register.
Yes.
So that could be done, but procedurally, that assessment form needs to form part of the recommendation.
I see. So we need to undertake that assessment and then make this recommendation at the next meeting.
Yes.
All right. All right, that's clear enough then.
Can we get access to the building?
Oh, yes.
The other piece of it is I do believe that under the Heritage Act changes, and we'll have to look into this, we do have an obligation to inform the owners of the property that this process is going ahead. So I can do some research on that and send that information out once I know, but have a better
Right.
idea of what's
Now,
required.
Now, here is as I understand it and as I explained it, the building currently owned by the congregation, the land where the building sits, owned by the diocese. So, and we're really mainly concerned with the building. Yes, that's what I mean. I mean, I don't, anyway, I would have to.
need to look into it.
Okay, all right.
So is this St. John's Anglican?
It is.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, the diocese owns the building and the property.
My understanding is the diocese doesn't yet own the building. I don't,
Well,
that's a quibble, I think, but
What we have to do, because I'm a member of the parish, right, trying to deal with it, as we did with Lyndhurst, is we need to get deconsecrate in order the few remaining parishioners are not responsible for the cost of the building. But the vagaries of the Anglican Church are such that nobody knows who owns what, other than the fact that there's a liability sitting there for parishioners that we need to unload. We're still going through the same thing with St. Luke's Linters, which has now been sold by the diocese, and the parishioners will see not a dime of that after all the many, decades of putting money into it. So putting that aside, the diocese would probably sell us the building for $1,
Right.
and we could move it because the cemetery, most of you know this, surrounds. So the cemetery is still active, the cemetery is still managed, as you well know. So if the building were to be moved, then it would relieve the cemetery board of that responsibility. And there's enough responsibility just taking care of the cemetery, right? So I think the vision is to see the building moved. And I'm not sure whether it being designated or not would slow down a demolition, because the insurance on the building will carry on whether it's consecrated or not.
Right.
So we do have time. So if the diocese, which it very well may object to any kind of formality with respect to that property, I just wonder if there are other less formal ways we could move the discussion along.
Arnie?
Sorry, thank you. I've got the Heritage Act open here. So if a council decides to list a property, the assessment needs to be completed. And then if it's been included on the register as a listed property, the council shall, within 30 days after including it on the register, provide the owner of the property with the notice that the property has been included on the register. The notice needs to include a statement why the council believes it to be of cultural heritage value or interest, a description of the property, a statement that if the owner objects to the property being included in the register, they may object to the inclusion by serving on the clerk a notice of objection, and an explanation for the restriction concerning the demolition or removal of building or structure on the property. So this now, under the new structure for appeals, could potentially be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So it may be in our best interest to have discussions with this around the owner of the property prior to. The other alternative that I've looked at in other situations is to document the property so that all of the information is there, and not necessarily be including it on the Heritage Register if the intent is to ensure that it's documented and known, if there's not a concern with the long-term demolition, if that's the main goal.
Well, I mean, the goal, I guess the concern is that something will happen to the church, and obviously it would be better if we had it completely documented before something did happen to it. I sort of gather from what you're saying is that by listing it, we potentially put the township in a position where they would have to defend that at some expense.
There's a potential for that, and I'm not saying it would go there, but so then the act goes on to say, so what a listing does is a listing really defers demolition and requires that a notice be provided to council in the event that an application for demolition is received. So if a property that's not been designated but is included on the register, and the owner they're not permitted to demolish or remove the building or structure without providing the council of the municipality at least 60 days notice in writing of the owner's intention to demolish or remove the building or structure, or to permit the demolition or removal of the structure. So then the council has what that notice really does is basically, are we going to designate it, or are we going to allow them to demolish it subject to appropriate documentation? So rather than going down the road of just listing a property without the owner's agreement or permission, it probably makes sense now that these changes have, before the Heritage Act didn't include the notice in the appeal necessarily, the same way that it does now. But now that it's been changed to go that way, it makes more sense to have that discussion with the owner in advance.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with that. One of the reasons I would like to see this happen is because I think we need to go through this process so that everybody involved, including those people in the building department, understand clearly what their responsibilities are with regard to properties that are listed on the register. Because we had this incident 4 years ago where we had a registered property and the building department issued a demolition permit and never bothered to tell anyone in council or on the Heritage Committee about it. So I think we have to do, it's important that we do this so that people understand what the process is.
So I can tell you that that would not happen again. I don't know what happened at that time, but we have clearly saved files now. The building inspectors are very aware of their responsibilities should a demolition permit be received for anything on the register. I can't speak to that moment in time, but I can tell you right now that the staff that do report to me in building and planning fully understand their responsibilities under the Heritage Act.
So if I can jump in for
ESPR.
a second, thank you. It looks like we've got 2, maybe 3 objectives in this discussion. And one is to I guess the most easily checked off one is to document the building and the heritage attributes of it and so on. Another one would be to potentially have it on the registry. And I guess the ultimate one is to put off, if possible, the potential demolition of the building.
Well, yes, I think, again, aside from all the other things that might happen, hopefully by going through this process, it might gain some public profile and we may be instrumental in helping them find an alternative solution to them rather than having the building demolished. I mean, I think that's part of it. I mean, if we just let it go and let the diocese deal with it, they'll deal with it in whatever way is most convenient and least expensive for them. If there is more public awareness of the fact that the building is, I won't say in danger, but something is going to happen with it, there may be some opportunity for somebody to come forward with an appropriate solution.
So I guess logically, the first step then would, and especially before it changes ownership, have a discussion with the current owners, the parishioners.
Right. Well, that could happen as part of the assessment, I would say.
Yeah, so then we could say, we could say to them, we want to do an assessment. And by the way, there are heritage grants available if you're on this registry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what, that's a short-term solution for this. But
Mhm.
so, I mean, Trish Miller, who was the priest, she's offered to let us go into the building. So I think we can arrange a time with her where we could go and do the assessment, a complete assessment. So,
Historically speaking, has the Anglican church diocese in general, have they demolished churches in the past?
oh no, but they sell them. They sell
Oh.
them quite,
If you,
they're operate as a business, the Anglican Church does. So, I mean, they're get their eye on the bottom line all the time. And then the case of this church, because they can't sell it because of its location, then the obvious solution is either it moves or it gets demolished so that they don't have to maintain it and insure it.
if you want to see a real schmozzle in a related topic, have a look at what's going on in Newfoundland right now.
Oh, right, with the Catholic Church. Well, of
Yeah.
course, they have for different reason, but yes, for sure. All right, then I will pursue that matter with Trish and arrange a time when we'll get the assessment documentation together. Any further comments on this matter?
There is a church. I don't know what religion, but there is a church near Waterton, Escott, that's been changed into a residence.
That was an Anglican church.
St. Andrews.
Was an Anglican church.
Oh,
That-
yeah,
That little
uh,
white one. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, then, item 7.4, update on the naming of private lanes. Marnie wants to fill us in on this.
Yes, so after reviewing all of the names that we received and going back to the county with the name suggestions, none of the names were appropriate or could be approved based on duplicate names, other similar names. So we've gone back to the residents, or not the property owners that abut both potential private lanes. For the one up near Sealy's Bay, it's looking like Chickadee Lane is the most appropriate one based on the names that have been suggested by the residents in the area. We're checking with the county. It looks like that one might be the final one, but we're still in the process of going back and forth with the residents on that one. With respect to the one by the KOA campground, again, we're still consulting with the landowners in the area to come up with another name that, or some name suggestions from them that might work. And we'll bring that back to the Heritage Committee when we actually have some. So the circulation that you received, Keith, was because there was input provided previously. It wasn't necessarily a Heritage Committee circulation that was sent out. So once we have another list of suggestions or a suggestion that's a generally accepted one from the residents that abut either property, will come back to the Heritage Committee before we go forward to council with a recommendation for renaming the private lanes.
Just as a matter of interest, I don't know, Gordon Oki actually went and visited the folks who live on the unnamed lane near Sealy's Bay. And was told that people were happy with the existing name, which of course is not acceptable. And actually was told that people who wanted to change the name were busybodies. Regarding the Knights Creek Lane, the reason that name was discounted is because it has a silent letter at the beginning. You cannot have a name with a silent letter at the
Wow.
beginning. It's something to do with the dumbing down of the population, I think. So I think it should just be called Knights Creek without the K, quite honestly. It's not going to matter. It's for people who can't read, isn't that the way it works?
It's all to make it easier for.
Well, exactly. But, okay, so Knights Creek without a K. Anyway, we're not making any suggestions at this point. That was just an update. Moving on, information items. Staff update.
Don't have a whole lot to update you on. I have been looking at the Heritage Register that was updated based on the previous one and adding in the additions that the committee has added to it over the last few years. What I'd like to do for the September meeting is have that in a final form where I can bring it forward for a recommendation from the Heritage Committee to council, so that we can have a new sort of complete up-to-date register adopted through council, because the last one was done in 2008. There's been some additions, there's been some cleanup. So I'd like to bring it back in a clean form. There's multiple versions that exist throughout our file system, and I want to make sure that I take the question out of it so that there's one up-to-date register for
Right.
reference. And that way we could also post that on the township's website
Right.
and have it more accessible for residents as well.
So how do you want to proceed with that?
I will finish updating the document. I can circulate it to the committee, but my plan is to bring that forward in September as a committee item, as an agenda item.
For this committee?
Yes,
So, but if we were to look at it beforehand, we could probably.
I
if
can
there are any-
circulate it once I have the
Yes, all
document.
right. So that it would be in perfect form when it
Yes,
comes. Yes. okay.
absolutely.
All right, we're all on board with that. Council update? Yes, David.
Just one more thing. I reached out to the county while we were sitting here regarding the Lyndhurst Bridge. Current timeline is spring, summer, fall. So from spring until fall of 2023 for the reconstruction of the bridge. And then,
Sorry, you're saying reconstruction.
yes, of the Lyndhurst Bridge.
What, it's not just repointing then?
I think there's some concrete work to do underneath as well. Whatever work they are doing is throughout the spring to fall of next year.
I see, okay.
The Ontario Heritage Trust has been consulted in an earlier phase. However, they have to reapply once the design is complete, and their contact there is Kiki Arapoulos.
So who has to do the application? The county
The
has to
county.
apply to the Ontario Heritage Trust.
Correct. Once
see,
the
okay.
design is complete, they will reapply.
I see. All right, there is no council update, is there?
Can I just
Yes,
jump in for a
Pierre,
second?
yes.
I guess under staff. I just wanted to compliment staff on their, the way they're working with this committee, but also with other community groups. It's been a high level of cooperation and positive activity going on. And I just wanted to get that in during the meeting. And I'm sorry if it's not in the appropriate spot.
No, that's fine. It's completely understandable, and I agree with you. I mean, everybody, I think, I have to say, the committee and the staff that we work with, this has been the best it's ever been. I have to say that.
Thank you. You need to hear that.
It is, yeah.
Great.
It is, for sure. All right, is there other business to discuss?
Sorry, the only thing I would add is that the September meeting is our last meeting prior to the election. So we will need to think about sort of marching items, going forward items. Obviously, we'll have to go out and advertise for new committee. I'm hopeful that we'll have a lot of the same faces back again and be able to continue with what we're working on. But if there are specific items for consideration in terms of going forward, I know one of our first meetings, we talked about a work plan for heritage and those types of things. So I'd like to be able to include a discussion around some of that in terms of a go forward for items to make sure that momentum isn't lost on some of the projects that we currently do have.
And now that's in September, so there won't be another meeting after that, will there?
No,
Until the new year's here. So that meeting also would be our only opportunity to discuss budgeting for the following year or
yeah,
not?
that would be our last item. Yes, our last opportunity.
So. And we would also look at how we've spent this year's budget, I assume.
Yeah.
The 16th, it's on your agenda there, Art, if you have one.
In other committees where I've been, it's usually under the heading of legacy planning. You know, what documents, what information to provide to the
Okay,
replacement.
I understand. Yes, indeed. Well,
Would there be just budget discussions at that point?
We can include a preliminary budget discussion in
Yeah.
terms of what this year's budget was, what's been spent, and looking at some of the future projects and what might need to be allocated.
because if it operates as it did before, yes.
Sorry, I'm chatting with
I
Peter.
missed that. I thought we were each pressing the button at the same time.
So I know in advance that I won't be in the country on September 16th. I'm just letting you know.
Oh, so we'll be attending by Zoom, is that right? Or-
I don't know what I'll have access to. I'll be in Italy at that
Oh, I
point.
see, okay.
Well, these are-
All right. This also means that probably the new committee won't get appointed until March or April of 2023.
I would hope it would be sooner than that.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking what it was the last time. It didn't seem to be a very high priority for council. Yes, Pierre?
Can I ask a quick question
Yes.
of Barney? Because people keep asking me on the street, is there still money in the heritage
Grants?
grants?
Yes, there is.
There is.
So if you have people asking for that, I would ask that they submit in August so that
Right.
we have all of that for the opportunity to review it and be
For the
well
next
prepared
meeting.
for the September meeting.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
There'll be an avalanche.
I believe we've only awarded one grant this year.
Mhm.
So we have lots of money to dispose of.
Yeah.
Or go in-
Distribute.
distribute, or go into the reserve.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. All right. Further business. Can I have a motion for adjournment then? Hands flying up, Art. Motion seconding. Wilhelmina, did you? raise your hand? Second, motion of adjournment. I need a seconder. Mark. All right. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Thank you very much, everyone.